The Summer Everything Changed by Jacob Abernathy. Read by He Reads to You on YouTube and Patreon. Chapter 2. The next morning, sunlight found me before the alarm did. It poured through my thin curtains in soft, broken lines, and for a few seconds, I forgot everything. Where I was, what day it was, what done really meant. Then the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand pulled me back. It was a text from Ethan. Meet at the lake, noon. Bring the essentials. You know what I mean. I stared at the passage for a second, smiling despite myself. Essentials probably meant sunscreen, a towel, maybe snacks, but knowing him, it could just as easily been the disposable camera I keep in my bag or the tiny speaker that always ran out of battery halfway through the day. Down the hall, I heard Mom moving around the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted in, warm and familiar. I rolled out of bed, feet landing on the cool floorboards, and stretched. The gown from last night still hung on the back of my chair, the cat perched on top like a ghost of who I had been 12 hours ago. I ran my fingers over the fabric once more before grabbing my phone and heading for the shower. By the time I got downstairs, Mom was at the table with her crossword, still in her robe, a half smile tucked into the corner of her mouth when she saw me. "Well, if it isn't the graduate," she said. "You sleep at all?" "Some." She raised an eyebrow. "You look like your mind's already somewhere else." "Maybe it is." I poured a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Ethan texted, "We're going to the lake." "First day of summer," she said, setting down her pen. "Tradition." I nodded, smiling. It was true. We'd been going there on the first real day of break since sophomore year, back when it had been a mix of nerves and excitement, everyone comparing plans for college or who was dating who. Now it felt quieter, grown somehow. "Be careful," she said, though her voice softened when she added, "and tell Ethan I said hi." I laughed. You always liked him. He's polite. That's rare these days. "Polite?" I teased. "You must not have seen him try to parallel park." She waved me off. "Just go, and take water this time, please." By the time I reached the edge of town, the air was already warm, the kind that made everything shimmer slightly. I rolled the windows down, letting the smell of honeysuckle and asphalt fill the car. The road to the lake was narrow and familiar, winding through tall grass and wildflowers that had taken over the ditches. The lake itself wasn't big, just a wide stretch of blue-green water bordered by pines and an old wooden dock. But to us, it was freedom, the place you went when you didn't have to be anywhere else. When I pulled into the dirt lot, I saw Ethan's car already there. He was standing by the water's edge, skipping rocks like he'd been doing it his whole life. The sunlight caught in his hair, turning it gold at the edges. "Hey," I called as I stepped out. He turned, grinning. "You're late. It's 11:58. "That's basically late." I shook my head. "You're impossible." "I get that a lot." He tossed another rock, watching it skip 3 times before sinking. "Everyone's on their way. You, me, Lauren, Tyler, maybe Josh. I texted a few others, but you know how it goes." "Lauren's bringing snacks?" "Obviously. She texted me a picture of 3 bags of chips and a watermelon the size of her torso." I laughed. "That sounds about right." The air smelled faintly of pine and sunscreen. I could hear the hum of a boat motor somewhere across the lake. It felt like the world had slowed down just enough to let us breathe. We spread our towels out near the dock, the wood creaking underfoot. Ethan dropped his backpack with a thud and sat down beside it, pulling out a handful of stones, smooth and flat. "Training for stone-skipping Olympics?" I asked, sitting beside him. "Don't mock the craft." "Craft?" He gave me a look. "It's an art form." "Oh, of course," he grinned, and for a second the world felt lighter. Lauren and Tyler showed up about 20 minutes later, their car rattling with music you could have heard long before it came into view. Lauren was wearing sunglasses the size of her face and carrying a cooler that looked heavier than she did. "Help," she said dramatically as she reached us. "I'm dying. Help." Ethan jumped up to grab the cooler from her. "You bring the entire grocery store?" "Close," she said, plopping down on her towel. "We have sandwiches, chips, fruit, and the emergency cookies." Tyler dropped down beside her, already pulling his shirt off. "It's not an emergency until I say so." I smiled, spreading out another towel beside them. It felt easy, like slipping into a rhythm we'd known forever. Josh arrived a few minutes later, shouting something about forgetting sunscreen and immediately diving into the lake with his sneakers still on. Lauren groaned. He's going to ruin the upholstery again. Ethan laughed. That's his problem, not ours. We spent the next hour like that, laughing, swimming, letting the sun bake onto our shoulders. Someone started a game of chicken that ended in chaos, and for a moment I couldn't remember what it had felt like to worry about anything. The water was warm and soft against my skin, the air buzzing with the sound of cicadas and distant voices. When I climbed back onto the dock, dripping and breathless, Ethan was sitting there, legs dangling over the edge, watching the ripples spread out where he'd just been. Nice dive, he said. That wasn't a dive. That was survival. He laughed, handing me a towel. His fingers brushed mine, and for a second, something passed between us. Something small but electric. I pretended not to notice, but the heat in my chest gave me away. I sat beside him, wrapping the towel around my shoulders. The sunlight shimmered off the lake, scattering across the surface like spilled glass. Feels weird, I said quietly. What does? This. Being done with everything. Knowing everyone's going different directions soon. He nodded, eyes still on the water. Yeah, it's like we've been standing at the edge of something for so long, and now we finally jumped. And we don't know how deep it is, I added. Exactly. For a while, neither of us said anything. The others were still in the water, their laughter carrying across the surface. I leaned back on my hands, letting the warmth seep into me, trying to memorize the feeling. After a while, Lauren waved us over. We're doing lunch before Josh eats all the chips. We joined them on the grass under the trees, the cooler open between us. Someone had brought a deck of cards, and before long we were playing speed and talking over each other. The easy banter filled the air, inside jokes, summer plans, exaggerated stories. Ethan leaned close in at one point, his shoulder brushing mine as he reached for a sandwich. So, you decided yet? He asked quietly. About what? College? Whether you're staying or going? I hesitated. Still deciding. It feels big. Like too big to decide on a random Saturday big. He nodded. Yeah, I get that. What about you? He shrugged. I'm heading out in August, but I don't know. I keep thinking about what I'm leaving behind. Like what? He didn't answer right away. Like this, he said finally. Days like this. You. I blinked, caught off guard. The air suddenly felt different, denser somehow. Before I could say anything, Lauren threw a grape at him. Hey, philosopher boy, less staring, more eating. He laughed, shaking his head. You're lucky I'm too full to throw the sandwich. The moment broke, and I wasn't sure if I was relieved or disappointed. After lunch, the group started to thin. Tyler got a call from his dad and left first. Josh and Lauren followed soon after, promising to text about a bonfire later in the week. By the time the sun started to dip toward the trees, it was just Ethan and me again. The lake had gone quieter, the surface turning that deep blue that only happens before sunset. We sat on the dock, feet in the water, watching the sky change. You ever think about how many days we've spent here? I asked. A lot, he said. Probably too many. And there's no such thing. He smiled, glancing at me. You really love this place. I do. It's simple, predictable. Yeah, but that's the thing. It won't stay that way. I frowned. Why do you always have to be right? Just talented, I guess. I nudged him with my shoulder, and he laughed, leaning back on his hands. I'm serious, though, he said. Nothing stays. That's kind of the point. Deep thoughts for a lake day. Can't help it, he turned to me, his eyes catching the last of the light. I don't want to waste any of this. Any of what? This summer. Us. All of it. My throat felt tight for a second, and I didn't know how to answer. The sky had turned to fire above the trees, the reflection spreading across the water. I wanted to say that I didn't want to waste it either, that maybe I was scared of how much I already missed him, even though he hadn't gone anywhere yet, but the words stayed stuck somewhere between my ribs. So I just nodded and said softly, Then we won't. The sun slipped lower until the light scattered in thin gold ribbons across the surface of the lake. The air had cooled just enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. Somewhere beyond the trees, a dog barked, and then the sound of an engine drifted and faded down the road. The whole world seemed to pause and exhale. Ethan lay back on the dock, hands behind his head, one ankle crossed over the other. His hair was still damp, sticking to uneven spikes, and he looked utterly at ease. the kind of ease you can't fake. I sat beside him, legs folded under me, tracing the wood grain with my fingers. You think this place will feel different when we come back? I asked. He tilted his head towards me. Different how? I don't know. Smaller, maybe, or quieter. Like once we go out into the real world, this would just be a memory we tell ourselves to feel young again. He smiled faintly, eyes squinting against the sunlight. You talk like you're 80. I feel 80 sometimes. He laughed softly. Then what does that make me? 81. Rude. You set yourself up. He sat up, leaning forward on his elbows. Maybe it will change, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we'll still come back, even when it feels smaller, just to remember. Remember what? That we were here once. His voice had that low, thoughtful edge I'd come to know, the one he used when he said something he actually meant. I looked down at the water. The reflection simmered with movement, turning our faces into pale, rippling versions of ourselves. You're sentimental, I said. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not, just surprising. He smiled. Guess I'm full of surprises. I rolled my eyes, but it didn't reach my heart. There was something in the air, something fragile, like a thread I didn't want to pull for fear of breaking it. The sky deepened to violet. The last few cars in the lot disappeared, and the sound of water lapping against the dock grew louder, steady and rhythmic. Fireflies began to flicker in the tall grass behind us. Ethan stood and held out his hand. Come on. Where? You'll see. I hesitated just long enough for him to smirk. Then I took his hand, his fingers warm and rough from years of climbing trees and fixing things in his dad's garage. He led me to the shallow edge where the sand met the dock, our shoes sinking slightly. He looked out across the lake and then back at me. You trust me? Should I? He grinned. Definitely not. And before I could answer, he stepped forward into the water, tugging me with him. The cold hit like shock, pulling a yelp from my throat. Ethan! He laughed, water dripping down his neck. What? You said you wanted to make memories. I didn't mean hypothermia. He splashed me once, just enough to start a war, and suddenly we were both laughing, real, unguarded laughter that echoes across the lake. I tried to splash him back, missed, slipped on the slick sand, and he caught me around the waist before I fell. For a second, everything went still. The laughter stopped. The sound of water and heartbeat filled the space between us. Firm but gentle, his breath close enough that I could feel it against my cheek. I looked up at him, really looked, and realized there wasn't anything left between us except the truth we'd been circling for months. He swallowed, his voice almost a whisper. You okay? Yeah. But I didn't move. Neither did he. The world suspended, light fading, air cooling, the moment stretching just long enough for me to know it would stay with me forever. Then he stepped back, slow, like pulling away from something fragile. Sorry, he said quietly, though I wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. Don't be. We stood there, water rippling around our knees, the sky burning above us. When we finally climbed back onto the dock, the stars were out, a scattered handful of brightness against the deep indigo sky. I wrung out my hair and sat down, toes still in the water. Ethan joined me, pulling his knees to his chest. Remember when we were 14, he said? You came here with that notebook and told everyone you were writing a novel? I groaned. Don't remind me. It was about a girl who wanted to run away to the city, right? She was dramatic. You mean you were dramatic? I nudged him. You read it? Every word you let me. I turned to him. I didn't think you cared back then. I did. I just didn't know how to show it. There was a quiet honesty in the way he said it that made my chest ache. What happened to that story? He asked. I stopped writing it. I thought maybe I'd live a better one first. He smiled softly. You're doing pretty good so far. We sat there, the silence between us filled with the hum of crickets and gentle slap of water against wood. Ethan, I said after a while. Yeah? I don't want this summer to end. He looked at me, eyes steady in the dark. Then let's not think about the end yet. Easier said than done. He reached over, brushed a strand of wet hair from my face. Then think about this instead. I didn't breathe for a second. His hand lingered just long enough for my heart to stumble, then drop into some new rhythm I didn't recognize. The world around us blurred, lake, trees, night, until it was only him. I thought maybe he would kiss me then. I almost wanted him to, but instead he let his hand fall, leaned back on his elbows, and looked up at the sky. "See that?" he said, pointing. "That's Lara, the harp." Followed his gaze. "You made that up." "No, seriously. My dad showed me once. The bright one there is Vega. It's supposed to be one of the brightest in the whole sky." "It's beautiful." "Yeah." He paused. "It is." I didn't have to look to know he wasn't talking about the star. We stayed until the last trace of light disappeared behind the trees. Neither of us said much. There didn't seem to be a point in ruining something that felt complete just by existing. When we finally packed up, the dock creaked beneath our steps, and the air smelled faintly of smoke from someone's far-off fire. The road back to town was dark, lined with fireflies. Ethan walked me to my car, the gravel crunching under our feet. He stopped beside my door. "Same time tomorrow?" I smiled. "You really think I can resist?" "Didn't say you could, just making sure." "Yeah," I said. "Same time." He hesitated, hands in his pockets, the corners of his mouth turning upward like he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Finally, he just nodded. "Night, Maddie." "Night." He waited until I started the engine before walking back to his car. For a second, our headlights crossed, spilling over each other like paths that hadn't touched but weren't quite the same. When I got home, the house was quiet again. Mom had left a note on the counter. "Spaghetti in the fridge. Love you." I smiled, warmed up a bowl, but barely ate. My mind was still back at the lake, the reflection of the stars, the sound of his laugh, the way his hand found mine in the water. Later, in bed, I scrolled through my phone and found the photo Lauren had taken earlier that day. All of us, standing on the dock, sun on our backs, we looked young and endless. But what caught me wasn't the group. It was the way Ethan's eyes were turned towards me, mid-laugh, as if that was the only thing that mattered in the frame. I locked my screen, set my phone down, and turned off the light. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere far away, the lake lay still under the stars, holding the shape of our day like it didn't want to let go. As I drifted towards sleep, one thought settled in, quiet and certain. This was the beginning, the real beginning.